Well.
In his opening remarks, Governor Kasich wasted no time in getting to the news of the week. The ISIS attacks on Paris, he said, are an attack on us all.
We need a significant coalition, a coalition of our friends in Europe, a coalition that would include our people who see things in a lot of the same ways we do in the Middle East, that we would join together and move immediately to destroy ISIS where it exists. We cannot wait any longer. You either pay me now or you will pay me a lot more later. And it's time for the United States to assume leadership.
While the world's response to ISIS dominated his short talk, he also emphasized a strong economy, paving the way for Pat Robertson's opening question.
Tell us about that Ohio miracle. How in the world did you do it? I was in Cleveland. That place was run down, something awful. And now you've got a stable credit rating. You're paying off your bills. How'd you do it?
We were running an $8 billion deficit, Pat. People said you had to raise taxes. Our credit was going down the drain. I said, raise taxes. If Pat Robertson and I own a restaurant and we don't have any customers, and I say, Pat, why don't we just raise our prices? You'd laugh at me. So what we did is we demonstrated, we went through all the programs, we made them work better, and some we got rid of. We restrained spending, we cut taxes, and today we've gone from an $8 billion hole to a $2 billion surplus. We've cut taxes.
Kasich says the first thing he'd do as president is to focus on jobs by cutting taxes for both individuals and corporations. He'd also move to cut federal spending with plans like this.
And, by the way, get rid of some of this really crazy regulation. We should freeze all major regulation for at least 1 year, and we need to begin to institute common sense.
This week, Kasich moved to halt the flow of Syrian refugees to the Buckeye State, and he has taken not-so-subtle jabs at President Obama's action, or lack of it, in the wake of the Paris attacks.
The president said that ISIS is the JV team. He has said just recently that it has been contained. He said it just before the attacks in France. Would you like to comment on the conduct of the foreign policy of the nation in the last few weeks?
Well, you know, what's astounding about it is created vacuums that are being filled by others, and people have learned to not trust the United States, our friends. A perfect example of that is the red line in Syria, where we said that we would go, and then we just walked away. Here's, I believe, the way it works. First of all, the United States is the convening nation. We are the strength of the free world. If I were president, I would be in Europe, and I would be convincing them, and I don't think it would take a lot to convince them that their very way of life and their very existence is at risk. And we need to work jointly to destroy the threat.
Do you think Article 5 of the NATO agreement, which says if one nation is attacked, they're all attacked and all should come to the aid of the one, should we come in right now as the United States and go beside France and help in this crisis?
And I was the first one to call for using Article 5. Today, the French basically said we're going to work with our European allies. They did this almost when we were dealing with Yugoslavia, then they ultimately turned to us. So I think we need to make it clear to the French, anything you need, anything you want, we stand shoulder to shoulder with you.
In addition to France, Kasich told Robertson the U.S. should arm the Kurds fighting ISIS and bolster its support for Ukraine in the midst of a protracted conflict with Russia.
The Ukrainians have had a long history of suffering, and people have tried to blot out their history, and all they want to do is to fight for themselves. We've got to give them what they need. We don't have to put troops on the ground. This is a case where they will do what they need to do in their own interest. Just give them the help. And that sends a message to all those nations in the eastern part of Europe, you know, who struggled for so long to be free. And, you know, the other nation that has taken advantage of us has been the Chinese, with cyber attacks, claiming they own the South China Sea. You know, I mean, this cannot be tolerated.
They could compromise our command and control centers and cripple our military unless we do something. Do you think we've done enough to to set up the firewalls we need?
I don't think we have. I think that we have not been in a position of where we have had a strong policy. Again, I think the administration believes that through accommodation, somehow things will work. Through accommodation, these problems will go away. And accommodation creates vacuums, and vacuums create doubt, and then the enemy decides to fill the vacuum. And Pat, you know, I've got 2 daughters that are almost 16 years old, and I wonder what kind of a world they're going to have. And frankly, it's kind of why I'm running for president, for my daughters, and for the fact that I have the experience to know how to not only reinvigorate the economy, but to reform and handle foreign policy and the rebuilding of our defense.
Let's talk about that agreement that was just signed with the Iranians having to do with nuclear, well, the whole nuclear program of the Iranians. They scoffed at us right after we signed it. That has not been ratified by the Senate. If you were president, would you cancel that deal?
Well, Pat, I would certainly hold the Iranians accountable and make sure that our allies know that any violation of that means that we as a group slap those sanctions on that brought the Iranians to the table. You know, I really believe in multilateral action. I don't want to signal anything 15, 16 months ahead of an election. But what I will tell you is any violation of that agreement, even if we need to move unilaterally to slap the sanctions back on, we should have to do it. And if we find that they're developing a nuclear weapon and we know where it is, that's not acceptable. Now, you know, you run for things, you got to be careful about the way you communicate. You know, walking around and talking about blowing things up are really for the amateurs.
Yeah.
But, you know, somebody said to me, if you have a no-fly zone, would you shoot a Russian plane down? And my response is, if I have a no-fly zone, you can fly into my no-fly zone the first time and probably fly out. But if you fly in a second time, you're not going to be flying out. Now, the same message gets communicated, but leaders have to be steady, calm, determined, and mature.
It's a big message in the Kasich campaign right now, and indirectly tears down fellow candidates like Donald Trump without naming them.
As an executive of a state, I have been involved in a number of things over the last 5 years. School shootings, the threat of Ebola, horrible storms that put people at risk, many other things. A water crisis that knocked out the water for 3-4 days in the city of Toledo. You learn over time that you have a strong hand, but people need to see strength. They need to see that you're in control, and they need to know that you have the inner strength to do what needs to be done. Jumping, jittery, inflammatory, it's not the way that you lead. You know, you think about the Reagan model, and it's really pretty simple. Keep it simple, use American strength, project who we are around the world, have determination, no weakness, rebuild your defenses, and rebuild your economy. Can you imagine, Pat, that we see, you know, we're just talking about the Chinese, and then we realize they own a chunk of our debt.
Oh, yes.
What kind of leverage do we have? Pat, we've got to balance the budget.
And Kasich would know. While in Congress, he chaired the House Budget Committee and crafted a historic deal to balance the federal budget. As governor, he eliminated Ohio's $8 billion budget shortfall.
And I've written, I think over the course of my lifetime, about 18 budgets, and I don't write fantasy budgets. I write budgets that say this is how we're going to get there. I think we can probably get there actually a little faster than we're projecting, but I don't want to make promises that can't be kept.
You know, we have more people incarcerated probably than any other nation on the face of the earth. And it seems like it's the liberal mindset to make more and more rules with more and more criminal sanctions attached to them, especially by these agencies. Again, what would you like to see done about that?
Well, Pat, it's a really great question because George Will just came to Ohio and praised our head of corrections because we have given people in the prisons an opportunity to work their way out of the prisons and develop skills. Furthermore, we have the resources now to treat the drug addicted in the prisons and hand them over to the community, and our recidivism rate is less than 20%.
Incredible.
The national recidivism rate is 47%.
Yeah.
Secondly, we also believe that putting non-violent felons in prison on minor drug charges, that's not the place for them to be at $22,500 a year. So we're trying to figure out how to get people rehabbed on their feet so they become tax-paying citizens. If you want to get a job in the state of Ohio and you've been a nonviolent felon, instead of coming in and marking on your application, I'm checking a box, yes, I was a felon, we take your thing, we throw it away, we've eliminated the box. We will find out in the second or third interview what you did, and you can explain it to us, but it's not going to be a veto from the beginning, because we want to give people a chance to get back up on their feet and lead a decent life.
How successful has that been so far?
It's been good.
Kasich also tackled the challenge of helping the mentally ill and made clear his Christian perspective.
We have to make sure that we have a responsibility towards the mentally ill. They don't belong in our prisons, and they don't belong under a bridge. They're made in the image of God just like everyone else, and they deserve a responsibility.
The elephant in the room: does this incredibly successful but incredibly unknown politician stand a chance in 2016? Kasich pointed to his efforts in Iowa and New Hampshire and touted his electability as governor.
I ran for re-election in Ohio, which is a very tough state. And I won the second largest victory in modern Ohio history. I won by over 30 points. I won 86 out of 88 counties, including Cuyahoga County, which the president won by 40 points. I received 26% of the African American vote, 51% of union households, and 60% of women. And why did it happen? It happened for two reasons. One, jobs. People have hope. You grow 347,000 jobs, your credit is strong, your pensions are strong also. People get a sense that I can get something. But you know what the other thing is? When you look to helping the developmentally disabled, the mentally ill, the drug addicted, the working poor, people say, maybe this guy cares about me a little bit. I mean, I know he's a politician.
Yeah.
And I know that I can't hardly invest in this, but maybe, just maybe, he gets me. And that, I think, is what led to that kind of a victory, and frankly, in our country, which is so divided among Republicans and Democrats, the issue of race, the struggles we have with addictions in this country. Bring people together. We can fight, but we don't have to demonize one another. And the message is, in America, everybody gets a chance. Everybody can have hope that we're going to have a system that's going to allow them to be rewarded for hard work.
CBN's David Brody moderated the event and took questions from the audience at Regent University and online.
This is Jack from Sarasota Springs, New York. He says, Governor, you disagree, obviously, with Donald Trump about deporting 11 million people. What specifically do you plan on doing about it?
The border?
Yes.
Well, we have to finish the border. Pat, I was talking to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and the wonderful guy who heads it, he says, you know, I agree with you on virtually everything, but I don't agree with you on the wall. And I said, sir, do you lock your doors at night in your house? He said, yes. I said, well, if you lock your doors, it's to keep people from wandering in and out. I think a country has a right to lock its doors. So get the wall, get the protection of the border. We need to know who's coming in and out. And once that's done, don't come across. We just got to say no more. And then I think we need a guest worker program so people can move in and go back home. And for the 11 million that are here, if that's what the number is, they broke the law to get here, but if they haven't engaged in any other criminal activity, I believe they can pay a fine, assume other responsibility, pay some taxes, and then they can have a path to legalization, but not one to citizenship.
Another audience member asked this.
Susanna from actually her hometown, Jerusalem. As an American who grew up in Israel, I would like to ask you how you envision the future for U.S.-Israel relations.
Well, we abused the Israelis. I mean, what was going on between the president and and Netanyahu was, it was terrible. It was a disgrace. And frankly, if we have a disagreement with them, if we have problems, talk to them in private. Get them in the back room. You don't do it in front of cameras and hurt our friends. We just did not treat Israel right. And if I'm president, we're going to protect Israel, and I think everybody in this room knows that this is critical to us.
John Kasich and Dr. Pat Robertson, everyone. Thank you both.